The Takelma are a Native American people who originally lived in the Rogue Valley of interior southwest Oregon, with most of the villages sited along the Rogue River. The name Takelma means along the river. History. Much less is known about the lifeways of the Takelma Indians than about the neighbors in other parts of Oregon and northern California. The homeland was settled by Euro-Americans late in the history of the American frontier, because the surrounding mountainous country protected it. But once colonization began, it proceeded rapidly. The discovery of gold spurred the first white settlement of the region in 1852. The Takelma who survived were sent to reservations in 1856. Settlers and natives lived in the region together for less than 4 years, because Takelma territory included the most agriculturally attractive part of the Rogue Valley, particularly along the Rogue River itself. The valuable land was preferentially seized and settled by Euro-American invaders in the mid-19th century. Almost without exception, these newcomers had little or no interest in learning about their indigenous neighbors, and they considered them a dangerous nuisance. They recorded little about the Takelma, beyond documenting their own perspective on conflicts. Native Americans living near the Takelma but on more marginal and rugged land, such as the Shastan and Rogue River Athabascan peoples, survived the colonization period with their cultures and languages more intact. Conflicts between the settlers and the indigenous peoples of both coastal and interior southwest Oregon escalated and became known as the Rogue River Wars. Nathan Dow that examined peaceful encounters between the whites and southern Oregon Indians, encounters he describes as middle ground interactions, undertaken by cultural intermediaries. Dow that argues that without such middle ground contact, the Takelma and other southern Oregon Indians would have been exterminated rather than relocated. In 1856, the U.S. government forcibly relocated the Takelma who survived the Rogue Indian Wars to the Coast Indian Reservation on the rainy northern Oregon coast, an environment much different from the dry open chaparral country that they knew. Many died on the way to the Siletz Reservation and the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation, which now exists as Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon, and many died on the reservations from disease, despair and inadequate diet. Indian agents taught the surviving Takelma farming skills and discouraged them from speaking their own language, believing that the best chance for productive lives depended on the learning useful skills and the English language. On the reservations, the Takelma lived with Native Americans from different cultures, and their intermarriage with people of other cultures, both on and off the reservation, worked against the transmission of Takelman language and culture to Takelman descendants. The Takelma spent many years in exile before anthropologists began to interview them and record information about the language and lifeways. Linguists Edward Sapir and John Peabody Harrington worked with Takelma descendants. In the late 1980s, Agnes Baker Pilgrim, granddaughter of Takelma chief George Harney, emerged as the most significant spokesperson for the Takelma. In 1994, on the banks of the Applegate, the Takelma people performed a sacred salmon ceremony for the first time in a century and a half. Another endeavor, the Takelma Intertribal Project, starting in 2000, has worked to restore edible, medicinal, and basketry plants through traditional techniques of burning and pruning. In the 2010 census, 16 people claimed Takelma ancestry, 5 of them full-blooded. Culture, environment and adaptation. The Takelman people lived as foragers, a term that many anthropologists consider more exact than hunter-gatherers. They collected plant foods and insects, fished and hunted. The Takelma cultivated only one crop, a native tobacco. The Takelma lived in small bands of related men and the families. Interior southwest Oregon has pronounced seasons, and the ancient Takelma adapted to these seasons by spending spring, summer and early fall months collecting and storing food for the winter season. The Rogue River, around which the villages nucleated, provided them with salmon and other fish. Ancient salmon runs were reputedly large. The intensive and coordinated labor involved in large-scale capture of salmon with nets and spears by men and the cleaning and drying by women provided the Takelma with an excellent, protein-rich diet for much of the year. If the salmon runs were good, the salmon diet was supplemented, or replaced in years of poor salmon runs, by game such as deer, elk, beaver, bear, antelope and bighorn sheep. Smaller mammals, such as squirrels, rabbits and gophers, might be snared by either men or women. Yellow jacket larvae and grasshoppers also provided calories. The limiting factor in the Takelma diet was carbohydrates, since fish and game provided abundant fat and protein. To get the carbohydrates and vitamins needed for good health, the Takelma collected a variety of plant foods. However, consistent with optimal foraging theory, which suggests that humans, like other creatures, decide what foods to eat depending on what gives the greatest nutritional value for the work expended to get it. The Takelma strategically focused on two plant foods, acorns and camas, also known as camassia. They harvested acorns from the two species of oaks in the Rogue Valley Territory, Oregon white oak and California black oak. When these foods were not available, or for variety in the diet, Takelma women also gathered and processed the seeds of native grasses and tarweed, dug roots and collected small fruits. Dwellings. During the winter months, the Takelma lived in semi-subterranean homes dug partly into the insulating earth with superstructures built of vertically placed sugar pine planks. Poorer people also lived in pole and bark dwellings, well banked with earth and dry leaves for insulation. Typically the planks rested on two 6-foot-tall vertical shafts that supported a horizontal central pole. Beds of cattail mats were placed adjacent to the fire pit, with openings in the roof to allow for ventilation. Takelma homes bore structural similarities to the semi-subterranean homes of the Klamath and Modoc peoples to the east, who spoke languages in the Plateau-Penutian family, and to those of the Shasta to the south, who spoke various Shastan languages. One historical account describes a rectangular plank structure large enough to hold 100 people, but archaeologists in the region have typically found remains of much smaller dwellings. During the warmer months of summer, Takelma lived in residences made of brush or forwent them all together. Bibliography. Beckham, Stephen Dow, Requiem for a People, The Rogue Indians and the Frontiersmen. Corvallis, Oregon. Oregon State University Press. ISBN 0870715216. Campbell, Isle. American Indian Languages, The Historical Linguistics of Native America. New York, Oxford University Press. ISBN 0-19-509427-1. Dowdett, Nathan. Uncertain Encounters. Indians and Whites at Peace and War in Southern Oregon 1820s–1860s. Corvallis, Oregon, Oregon State University Press. ISBN 0870715496. Hannan, Nan. An Underview of Southwest Oregon in Living with the Land, The Indians of Southwest Oregon. Nan Hannan and Richard K. Olmo. Medford, Oregon, Southern Oregon Historical Society. Goddard Ives. Languages. Handbook of North American Indians. Washington, D.C., Smithsonian Institution. ISBN 0-1604877749. Gray, Dennis J. The Takelma and the Athapascan Naos, a new ethnographic synthesis for the Upper Rogue River area of southwestern Oregon, University of Oregon Anthropological Papers, No. 37, Eugene, Department of Anthropology, University of Oregon. DeLand, Jeff. First over the Siskiyous, Peter Skeen Ogden's 1826–1827 journey through the Oregon-California borderlands. Portland, Oregon Historical Society Press. DeLand, Jeff. The Indians of Southwest Oregon, an ethno-historical review. In Living with the Land, The Indians of Southwest Oregon, Nan Hannon and Richard K. Olmo. Medford, Oregon, Southern Oregon Historical Society. ISBN 0-943388082. Mithun, Marianne. The Languages of Native North America. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press. ISBN 0-521-23228-7. ISBN 0-521-29875-X. Sapir, Edward. The Takelma Language of Southwest Oregon in France's Handbook of American Indian Languages, Part 2. Washington, D.C., U.S. Government Printing Office, 1922, pp. 1–296. Sapir, Edward. Takelma Texts. Anthropological Publications of the University Museum, Pennsylvania. University Publications of the University Museum, 2 pp. 34–42. Sturchavant, William C. Handbook of North American Indians. Washington, D.C., Smithsonian Institution.